Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thank you for joining me this evening for meditation and Sutra study. This evening we'll be taking part in a 15-minute guided meditation. We'll be starting our reading of the Nirvana Sutra. There will be a Dharma talk, followed by a Q&A. Before we get into that, however, I'll remind you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you'd also hit the notification bell, that'd be great too. That way you'll be notified when I do live streams in the future. These teachings are offered free of charge, but if you'd like to make a contribution, information for PayPal and Cash App can be found in the description for this talk. And if you'd like to do a deep dive into Buddhist training, check out my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. There's a link to a sample chapter in the description for this talk, and it's available anywhere books are sold. So let's get started with our guided meditation. The first step is easy. Just get into a position that's comfortable for you. My only rule is that you be in a position that you can hold for about 15 minutes without moving. And if you don't lie down, that'd be great too. We don't want anyone to fall asleep. So back straight. Chin slightly tucked. If you'd like some instruction, you can take your left hand, palm up, place it in your lap. Then take your right hand, palm up, place it atop your left. And we'll start very simply by focusing on the breath, namely by breathing in and out through the nose. This meditative breathing through the nose sends a signal to our parasympathetic nervous system and the rest of our body, letting us know that we're safe and that we can relax. And as we do that, as we breathe in and out through the nose, on every inhale, we poke the belly button out ever so slightly, as if we just had a big meal, and then we relax on the exhale. And the final step in our meditative breathing is every time our mind wanders, and it will, that's what minds do, we simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the physical sensations of the breath. The breathing in and out through the nostrils, the expansion and contraction of our diaphragm. And we'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. Just sit here and breathe. Wonderful. Now, as we continue with our breathing, we're going to add a visualization to the exercise. We're going to visualize a fire burning in our belly. In Buddhism, the belly, or specifically the hara, which is the space behind the belly button, is the seat of our spiritual power. And we'll visualize a fire there, burning brightly. The fire is whatever color our favorite color is. If we like blue, the fire is blue. If we like green, the fire is green. With every inhale, we bring air into our lungs. With every exhale, we visualize ourselves blowing on that fire, making it bigger and brighter, just like we would a campfire in the woods. And we're going to do that for about 2 minutes. We're just going to breathe on the fire of our enlightenment, making it bigger and brighter with every breath. I'll keep time, no need to worry about that. But if our mind wanders, that's fine too. We simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the breath. Wonderful. As we continue our meditative breath in and out through the nose, we visualize a channel of energy going down from our belly all the way to the center of the earth. And once there, we find an energy that's identical to our own. If our own spiritual energy is blue, the earth's energy is blue. If our energy is green, the earth's energy is green. And now with every inhale, we visualize ourselves pulling energy up, up, up from the earth into our belly, the seat of our spiritual power. With every exhale, we blow on that spiritual energy, just like we were before, growing it with every inhale and magnifying it with every exhale. bigger and brighter with every breath. We'll do this for about a minute. I'll keep time. And if our mind wanders, that's okay. We simply say hello to our thoughts. And we bring our focus back to our breathing and the visualization. Wonderful. Now we're going to visualize a second channel of energy going up, up, up from our belly, past our solar plexus, past our throat, all the way up to the top of our head. With every inhale, we'll continue to pull energy up from the earth into our belly. With every exhale, we push it out, up, up, up out of the top of our heads until it explodes like a volcano and showers our entire body in healing spiritual light. Every inhale, we pull energy up from the earth. And with every exhale, we push it out the top of our heads like a bellows, like a volcano, covering ourselves with healing spiritual energy. We'll do this for about 2 minutes. I'll keep time. And if the mind wanders, that's okay. We simply say hello to our thoughts and bring our focus back to the breathing and to the visualization. Wonderful. You're all doing such a great job sitting so quietly and so still. The energy is profound. But now it's time to bring our meditation practice to a close. So slowly, gently, we close off the energy channel going from our belly to the top of our heads, until the energy with every inhale and every exhale barely reaches our nose. Then it barely reaches our throat, our solar plexus, until finally it rests right where it began, in our belly. And then we do the same with the energy channel going from our belly to the earth, pulling it up into our cells. Perhaps we give a silent bow to the earth as thank you for helping us in our spiritual journey, just like it did the Buddha 2,600 years ago. And now we come into our bodies, moving our heads to the left, and then to the right, side to side, simply focusing on the physical sensation in our neck. Till finally we come back to center. And if our eyes are closed, when we're ready, and only when we're ready, we open them. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Take your time. Beautiful. Thank you so much for doing that with me. Meditation is an important part of the practice. And it prepares our minds for what we're going to do next, which is Sutra study. This evening, we'll be beginning our reading of the Nirvana Sutra, which is a very important text in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. It's a text where, amongst other things, Buddha tells us what is nirvana and why should we care about it. Not the focus of today's reading, but something we'll get to. So I'll do the reading and then we'll discuss. The text I'm using is the Nirvana Sutra, Chapter 1. It's the BDK English Tripitaka translation. Not necessary to have a copy of the text for these classes, but it can be useful if you'd like to follow along. Today's reading starts from page 108. And it says, "What is correcting others? Once, when I was expounding the Dharma, a woman nursing a baby came to see me, and she bent her head to my feet to show respect. Something occurred to her. Thinking about this, she then sat down facing me. At that moment, the world-honored one understood and asked her about it. Out of love and affection, you have put no small amount of butter into your baby's mouth, but you do not know the degree to which he has digested it, if at all. No?" The woman then said to the Buddha, "Astonishing, world-honored one, that you are able to know so well the thoughts in my mind. All I ask of the Tathagata is if he would tell me how well the child has digested the food. World-honored one, this morning I did give the child a great amount of butter. I fear that he has not been able to digest it. He will not have a premature death, will he? All I ask of the Tathagata is to explain this for me." The Buddha said to her, "What your child has eaten, he in fact did digest immediately, increasing his lifespan." When she heard this, the woman's heart danced with joy. She then said to the Buddha, "The Tathagata speaks the truth, and I rejoice, world-honored one. It is from your desire to tame living beings that you thoroughly analyze and explain about digesting and not digesting. In addition, you have also taught us the Dharma in doctrines such as non-self and impermanence. If the Buddha, the world-honored one, had first expounded permanence, then those of us being taught would have said this teaching is the same as that of the non-Buddhist, and we would have abandoned it right away." The Buddha then informed the woman, "When your child grows big enough to where he can come and go on his own, what he eats at that point he may or may not be able to digest. And the butter that you gave him in the past will no longer suffice. The Sravaka disciples I have are also like this. Just like your infant, they have been unable to digest this teaching about permanent abiding. This is why I first expounded the doctrines of suffering and impermanence, as you described. But when the qualities in my Sravaka disciples become adequate for them to endure the cultivation of practices based on the Mahayana scriptures, I can then explain this sutra to them in terms of 6 flavors. What are these 6 flavors? I explain that suffering is sour, impermanence is salty, non-self is bitter, bliss is sweet, self is spicy, and permanence is astringent. In this world, there are 3 kinds of flavors, what I call the absence of permanence, the absence of self, and the absence of bliss. But using the defilements as kindling and wisdom as fire, this can be turned into what becomes a nirvanic meal to enjoy. I am speaking of what is permanent, blissful in self, and what enables all disciples to enjoy the fruit of the path. I also said to the woman, if a situation developed in which you wanted to go away for a period of time, you would have to make your bad sons go outside the house while you entrusted your treasury of valuables entirely to your good sons, would you not? The woman said, as true as a sacred teaching, our store of what is rare and valuable would be shown to the good sons, but not to the bad sons. Sister, it is the same with me. At the time of my parinirvana, the Tathagata's treasure of the subtle, hidden, and unsurpassed Dharma will not be given to the disciples who are Sravakas, just as you would not entrust your treasury of valuables to your bad sons. I have to entrust this to the Bodhisattvas, just as you would entrust your treasury of valuables to your good sons. Why is this? Because the Sravaka disciples formulate the idea of transformation in this context, presuming that a Buddha Tathagata truly passes into extinction. But as a matter of fact, I do not pass into extinction. This would be akin to your traveling to a distant place, and before you can return, your bad sons tell everyone you have died, when in fact you have not died. The Bodhisattvas will say that the Tathagata is permanent and immutable. In the same way, your good sons will not say that you have died. This is why my unsurpassed hidden treasury will be entrusted to the Bodhisattvas. Good man, if any living being proclaims that the Buddha abides permanently and is immutable, know that the Buddha dwells in his home. This is what I call the correction of others. What is capable of providing an answer that accords with a question? If someone came to the Buddha, the world-honored one, and asked, how could I attain fame as a great donor to charity without giving up my wealth? The Buddha would say to him, if there is before you a Sramana or a Brahmin, or someone of this nature who knows the contentment of living with few desires and who would never accept or retain anything impure, to that person you should give female and male slave attendants. To one practicing the restraints of religious life, give a girl. To one who has given up wine and meat, give wine and meat. To one who does not transgress the rule against eating after noon, give food in the afternoon. To one who does not wear flowers or fragrances, give flowers and fragrances. The fame of this kind of giving will spread throughout the world at almost no cost to you and your fortune. To preach in this way is what I call capable of providing an answer that accords with a question. So I like this text because it's very important, but it's also very shocking at the same time. Slavery, for example, was forbidden in Buddhism. It's one of the first traditions to forbid slavery as a practice, which was very common 2,600 years ago when the Buddha was alive and teaching. And yet, in the text, Buddha says, if you meet a monk or a nun, give them a slave. The eating of wine and meat are not allowed in Mahayana Buddhism, and yet the Buddha says, if you meet someone who's taken this vow to abstain from alcohol, to abstain from meat, give them wine and meat. Why would he say that? I thought about that question for quite a bit. And then I remembered an experience I've had multiple times, which seems unrelated, but I promise it is, when I've gone on Buddhist retreats. Now, a retreat practice isn't required to be Buddhist, but it's very useful. And essentially what you do is you go to a meditation center or a temple and you renounce the daily accoutrements of life for a little while. So you can focus either for half a day or a week or several months or even several years on your spiritual practice, on your training. So when we go on retreat, there are lots of rules, right? So maybe we eat meat in our daily life, but when we're on retreat, we're vegetarian because there's no meat served in the temple. We may go to bed early and wake up early. We have a strict schedule of when we chant, when we meditate, when we read the sutras. We can't use cell phones. We can't use laptops. Depending on the tradition, we may or may not be allowed to speak outside of certain circumstances. We strip away everything so we can focus 100% on our spiritual training. So it's a very trying practice, but it's also a very fruitful practice if we do it. And yet, you find people when you go to a retreat center who don't take the practice seriously. They try to get around the rules and the regulations. So maybe the temple doesn't serve meat, but they sneak in beef jerky in their backpack. I remember one retreat I was at, a gentleman I was sharing a room with every night would pull out his cell phone, which we weren't allowed to have, and he'd start playing Candy Crush. Another retreat I went to, I got up in the middle of night to use the restroom, and as I was in the hall, I saw two gentlemen whispering, and they kind of did the thing where they look at you and they stop, and then they turn their back and they talk a little bit more, but more quietly. So, you know, something's up, but you're not sure what. And it just so happened I have to walk past them to get to the restroom. And from what I could tell, they were planning how they and a couple others were going to sneak out and go to a bar that was down the street from the meditation center. We don't serve alcohol in the temple because we're on retreat, but we're going to go to a bar. And this has always been very strange to me because just to get to a retreat center takes a lot of energy. Oftentimes you have to pay a fee because there's a cost to use the space and serve the food. You have to arrange travel to get there. So you go through all of this work just so you cannot do the work you're there to do. It's almost like going to a restaurant, paying for your food, and then getting up before you eat the meal. It makes no sense. Why do people do this? Well, we do this because, and I think this is especially true of Westerners, we like to do things half-heartedly. We don't want to be fully involved in whatever is happening, right? We want to talk to our family and friends on the phone, and we also want to watch TV at the same time. We want to drive our cars, and we want to listen to the radio. We want to work at our jobs and we want to look for another job at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with job searching or TV or listening to the radio per se. But in Buddhism, and especially in Zen Buddhism, we place a strong focus on doing one thing at a time, doing it wholeheartedly, 100%. Because if we're able to focus and do things wholeheartedly with every fiber of our being, what we find is our lives become a lot more contented and our minds become more peaceful. This is why we practice meditation before we do sutra study, because we're practicing giving ourselves 100% to the moment. Our minds wander, that's fine, that's what minds do, but then we bring it back to the present moment, back to the breath, back to the visualization. And then it wanders again, we come back to the breath, back to the visualization, over and over and over again. Why? Because that's where our contentment comes from. Not from constantly searching outside of ourselves, not from doing things half-heartedly, but doing one thing wholeheartedly. Whether it's meditation, whether it's a conversation with a loved one, whether it's our daily job, just focuses in 100% on what we're doing. Even if we don't want to do it. If we've made the decision, we're going to do it. If it's washing the dishes, if it's doing laundry, we're going to do it. And we're going to do it to our best of our abilities. Now, what ends up happening to these individuals who go on retreat and they do it half-heartedly is, in my experience, they generally end up leaving early. Right? So they paid all this money, they've gone to the retreat center, they've traveled there, and they don't stay the whole time. Because it's impossible to do retreat half-heartedly. You're either there or you're not. You can fake it for 1 or 2 days, but once you're day 4, day 5, you don't even remember what a chair looks like, because all you're doing is sitting on cushions and your back hurts because you're sleeping on a zabuton on the floor. You're either going to make the decision, I'm in it 100%, I'm going to see this thing through, or you pack up your bags and you walk out the door. And there's no great ceremony, in case you're wondering. If you tell the retreat leader you're leaving, they say, okay, thank you for your time, and they escort you out in a quiet way that's non-disruptive. And that's that. No shaming, no, you're a bad person, just, okay, thank you for coming. There's the door. So the question that the Buddha was asked was essentially, how can I practice the Dharma half-heartedly? I want to support the monastics. I want to give of my wealth. I want to practice generosity, which is one of the 6 perfections. But I don't really want to practice generosity. Like, I want to give you something, but I don't want to give you money because that would take away from my wealth. And I want to give you some food because the Buddha was a monastic. They accepted alms in the way of food. But I actually don't want to give you food because I actually wanted to eat that later today. So how can I do it? And essentially what the Buddha was doing in this moment is he was being a little bit of a smart aleck. He was saying, you know what, don't even bother. All the stuff that we're not supposed to have as monastics, just give us that. Because you don't actually want to do this anyway. So let's stop pretending for a moment. And so what he asked the person to do who wants to give of their wealth but not actually give up their wealth is fine. Give us the things that are impure. Give us the things you don't actually want anyway. The things you're not supposed to have, but you do have. We'll just take that. And this is somewhat harsh, granted, but it's also an important training because doing things half-heartedly is oftentimes worse than not doing them at all. I can think of times when I was a child and my mother told me to clean my room, and being a child, I didn't want to do it. So what do? You take all the toys and you throw them in the closet and you shut the door, and you're supposed to make the bed, so you just kind of throw the sheets on there and you leave to go play, right? Half-heartedly. And then what happens is, at least my mother would yell out the door, "Alex!" And I'd come running, and I knew what she wanted. I knew what I did. And she wouldn't say a word, just point up the stairs. I'd go up there, and I'd half-heartedly do it again. I'd put a few toys in the toy chest, but not all of them. And I'd kind of make the bed, but not really. And I'd run back out, and now she's mad, and I'm mad, and Alex! So much less suffering if I would just do it right the first time. If I just take my toys, put them in the toy chest, make the bed, a little bit more effort in the beginning, yes, but what happens? Now I can go play. Now she's not yelling down the street. Now she's not angry at me while she's trying to make me dinner. But doing it half-heartedly as a child, cleaning my room in this case, caused more suffering than if I had just done it fully at the start. And that's what the Buddha is telling us here in the Nirvana Sutra. If we're going to do this, do it. Do it fully with everything we have. It's true of Buddhist practice, but it's also true of our daily life. This is why I always tell you that our daily life is our spiritual practice, because we, especially as Westerners, go through our daily lives half-heartedly. And just like me making my bed half-heartedly when I was a child created more suffering for me, just like people going to retreats half-heartedly creates more suffering for them and the rest of the Sangha, just like the person who wanted to give up their wealth but not really created more suffering for themselves and others. We make everything so much harder than it needs to be. Buddhism isn't just about sitting on the cushion and the chanting and the prostrations and the offerings before the altar. As beautiful as all that is, it's also learning about how to wash the dishes. It's also about cleaning the toilet. It's also about cutting the grass. And understanding that, yes, it's going to rain tomorrow and the grass is going to shoot up, and in a week it's going to look like I never touched it. But I'm going to go out there, I'm going to cut the grass again. I'm going to wash the dishes again. I'm going to scrub the toilet again. Because this is my life. This is what I have to do. This is all I have to do. So if I'm going to do it, I need to do it with everything I have. I need to do it wholeheartedly, or it's better to not do it at all. If we can't wash the dishes, we're not going to be able to sit on the cushion. If we can't speak with kindness and compassion to the cashier, to the Uber driver, we're not going to be able to chant the sutras. I know this from my own personal experience. It just is what it is. When I first began training in Buddhism, I was shocked, especially in Zen, by the amount of work practice that is involved. How much time you spend giving dana to the temple by cutting the grass for them, by washing dishes for the monks, by sweeping the meditation hall, by polishing the Buddha statue. And in the back of my head, I was always wondering, always thinking, well, when are we actually going to practice Buddhism? Why am I doing this? This isn't spiritual practice. Now, 10 years later, I realized that's the fruit of spiritual practice. Because we don't spend our lives on the cushion. We don't spend our lives in front of the altar. We spend them where? We spend them washing the dishes. We spend them cleaning the toilet. We spend them driving to work. And what we do as spiritual people oftentimes, is we live our daily life half-heartedly because we think the spiritual practice is the real thing. I'm just going to go through the motions with my family, with my loved ones, but when I get to the temple, then I'm going to do it right. No, you won't. I'm going to sit on the cushion. I'm going to go to this meditation training, and I'm not really feeling it today, so I'm only going to kind of do the chanting, but next time I'm really going to nail it. No, you won't. Again, speaking from my own spiritual practice, my own experience, we have to learn to do things fully and completely every moment of every day, or else we won't be willing to do them at all. And this creates suffering for us. Remember, first noble truth, life is suffering. Second noble truth, suffering is caused by desire. The way to end suffering, third noble truth, is to end desire. The fourth noble truth, the way to end desire is the Noble Eightfold Path. To put it a different way, our desire to live our lives half-heartedly causes suffering. The way to live our lives wholeheartedly is the Noble Eightfold Path. And when we live our lives wholeheartedly according to the Noble Eightfold Path, our suffering goes away. When I was training in Buddhism, I took a bit of a sabbatical. I spent 8 months on retreat. I was traveling to different parts of the United States, living and working on organic farms. Farming is terrific spiritual practice, which is why to this day you'll see many monks and nuns who work and train in gardens, Zen gardens, aren't just there to be beautiful. That's important spiritual practice. Why? Because it's ruthlessly honest. Either you chop firewood or you don't have fuel for your fire that night and you can't cook. Either you go out and you plant the seeds or you don't have anything grow in your garden. Things are growing. Either you go out and pull the weeds around your vegetables or else they're not going to survive. You have to do farming wholeheartedly. You have to. Otherwise, again, you might as well not do it at all. It's more suffering rather than less. Some of the greatest spiritual teachings I personally learned were not from the sutras. It was not from sitting on the cushion. It was from working on a farm. And realizing that me trying to skirt around the rules and I don't really feel like putting gas in the tractor today, so I'm only going to put in half as much. And oh, the tractor ran out of gas because I was being lazy. I didn't put the gas in the tractor. So now I have to walk 1.5 miles back to the barn because I didn't do it right the first time to get the gas for the tractor. That's what happens when we live life half-heartedly. We create unnecessary suffering. On top of the suffering we already have, on top of the birth, the aging, the sickness, the death, etc., now we have the dirty dishes to deal with. Now we have the broken down tractor to deal with. Now we have the vegetables that aren't growing because we didn't pull the weeds from the garden. If we're willing to live our daily life wholeheartedly, the spiritual training naturally becomes a part of that. You do one, you do the other. Just like the absolute and the relative are different and the same at the same time, our spiritual training and our daily life are different and they're the same at the same time. The woman in the story, when she's talking about her infant and how she gave him butter and she wanted to know, did he digest the butter? To understand that, we need to realize that in the time of the Buddha, Buddhism, or rather butter, was considered medicinal. So it wasn't uncommon for women to give their children butter in the hopes that, maybe they're trying to overcome an illness or they're trying to extend their lifespan. So what she's saying is, I've given him the butter. Do you know if he digested it? Now, this is literal, but it's also figurative. I've given him the teachings. Has he digested them? Has he learned them? Is he practicing them wholeheartedly? The Buddha says yes. But then he also says later on, the butter you've given him today won't matter when he's a grown man. Eventually, he's going to have to find his own butter. And it's the same with us. Our daily life is the butter. It's the medicine that we get from the Buddha body. Whatever thing we're having to deal with in the moment, that's the teaching. And it's up to us to decide, are we going to digest it? Are we going to practice wholeheartedly with what's in front of us? The difficult family member, the job we may or may not like, the internet that goes out, the boiler that breaks. Are we going to practice with this thing, or are we going to run from it? Are we going to make our suffering less or worse? That's our decision to make. Are we going to digest this daily life? Are we going to live it with both hands? If we choose to do that, if we choose to practice our daily life and our spiritual training fully and wholeheartedly, we'll move along on the path. Our suffering will become less, we'll become more contented. We'll attain the nirvana that the Buddha talks about in this sutra. If not, we'll suffer, and that's fine too. Maybe we'll get it in the next life. Amitabha. So that's the teaching for today. I hope it was helpful. Now we move into the Q&A portion of this evening's chat, which is your opportunity to ask me questions either about the sutra reading, my Dharma talk, Buddhism in general. If you have comments you'd like to share with the Sangha, you can leave those as well. Just type them in the comment section. I'll be sure to respond. While we're waiting for those to come in, I'll make a few announcements. This is Meditation and Sutra Study, which we do every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live streamed at this channel. And the practice consists of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a sutra. Right now we're reading the Nirvana Sutra. There's a Dharma talk followed by a Q&A. On Sundays, we do what's called Dharma Sunday, which also starts at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that consists of a Dharma talk followed by a Q&A. Also, there's generally some sort of reading from current events. And the idea there is I take canonical Buddhist teachings and I tie them to real world events. Sort of the practical application of Buddhism. So we talk about politics, we talk about pop culture, philosophy, you name it. These teachings are offered at no cost, but if you'd like to make a contribution, information for PayPal and Cash App can be found in the description for this talk. If you'd like to do a deep dive into Buddhist training, you can check out my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. There's a link to a free sample chapter of the book also in the description for this talk. So let's see. Admarin said, too many people take education half-heartedly. Yes, that's very true. And that's very unfortunate. Living in the West, we really do take education for granted. Not realizing that there are many places in the world where children are only able to attend up to 3rd grade, if at all. I'm thinking of my great-great-grandmother who only had a 2nd grade education. She lived in the Deep South, and it was just understood once you knew how to read and write, you left school and you went to work out in the fields. So that's what she did. So it's very unfortunate that people take education half-heartedly, but it's a wonderful gift. A wonderful gift. Great insight. Allison Griffin said, good afternoon, Sensei, with the bow emoji. You said, thank you. 2 hands on the Dharma wheel, turning the wheel of Dharma. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. I'm doing my best, but I really owe it all to the people who turned the wheel before me and to your support. Thanks so much. Ben Tiptonford said, my roommate once said, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. You also said, thank you for your insights. That is 100% correct. It's funny, actually, my grandfather told me the same thing once. And it's true. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. This idea that, well, I'll act like this way in one part of my life, but I'll act differently in another part. No. You're either a hard worker all the time or you just don't like to work. You're either kind of considerate most of the time or you're just not kind of considerate. Not to say that everyone is the exact same way all the time, but generally speaking, yeah, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So true. So true. And that's exactly what the Buddha was trying to teach us in the sutra. Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. Divad Buddha X said, have you heard of revenge bedtime procrastination? Basically, people feel like they don't have any control or freedom in the day, so they stay up late in the night to rebel in a way. Thoughts on this? So I haven't heard of that, revenge bedtime procrastination, but it does make sense to me just because I'm just thinking of when I was younger and I used to stay up late for no reason. And there was a bit of that idea of like, well, I don't want to go to sleep. Even when I was a child, that was the thing that, my mom can make me go to my room, but she can't make me not stay up at night with my flashlight and read comic books, right? This idea that we'll rebel somehow, some way. And of course, that only ends up hurting us in my own life. It just made me tired and cranky the next day. And then I had to drink energy drinks and then I was jittery and it was a whole thing. So I've never heard of that specifically, but it does make a lot of sense to me. It's unfortunate, but it's a very human response. It's definitely something I've done in the past. Allison Griffin said, that was a great interpretation of that passage from the Nirvana Sutra. It is very confusing when first reading it, but makes sense now. It is confusing. It is. I had to read it 3 times before it made sense. Because I was like, wait, what do you say? It's like, this doesn't sound right. But sometimes the Buddha, in his compassion, likes to really shock us. And we have to, what just happened? So I feel like that's what was happening here. The story behind the Nirvana Sutra is this is the final teaching he gave before he passed into parinirvana, before he died. Which the Lotus Sutra also makes the same claim, so take it with a grain of salt. But the point is, I think all the gloves were off in this one. It is a very confusing passage, but I'm glad I was able to clear it up. Frank Ingiosi said, thank you for your teaching, Sensei, with the bow emoji. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate you being here. I'm glad this was helpful. Mika said, thank you. You also said, quick flash questions. What made you start practicing Buddhism? Are you practicing full-time? Advice for a working professional looking to take this spiritual journey. Also, will be following you for now on coming from Texas. Oh, wow. Well, first off, thank you for following me. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. I always appreciate subscribers, so that's very cool. To answer your questions, what made you start practicing Buddhism? Well, without getting into the whole story, because that would take a while, the short version is desperation. I had tried everything else that I could think of. I tried money, I tried partying, I tried success in the business world, and I just kind of reached a breaking point. And spirituality was the only thing left for me to try. And then I found Buddhism and it just worked. So I would say one thing that kind of lit the light bulb, so to speak, turned it on, was I saw a movie, 7 Years in Tibet, with, who's that actor? I want to say Matt Damon, but that's not correct. I can see his face. I can't think of his name. I don't know, some famous Hollywood guy. I remember he used to be married to Angelina Jolie. Brad Pitt. It was him. So it was Brad Pitt. He was the actor, and 7 Years of Tibet tells the story of a Austrian, I believe he was an Austrian mountain climber, who ends up in Tibet. World War II kicks off, I believe it is. And he ends up in a Chinese prisoners camp, and he escapes, and he goes to Tibet, and he's there, and he's a tutor to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And that was my first real introduction to Buddhism, was this Hollywood movie. But one thing that really struck me, there was this scene where the monks were trying to build a temple. And they're trying to build this monastery, this temple, and he's wondering what's the holdup, why is it taking them so long? So he goes over to ask them, and what he finds out is they're taking their time to take all the earthworms and remove them from the dig site so they don't kill them. And that just blew my mind. Like, that level of compassion for earthworms was just, wow, that's interesting. And then I studied some of the teachings of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and I was just taken aback by his compassion. If you don't know the story of His Holiness, he was living in Tibet, and China annexed Tibet, and he's now living in exile in India. So he was living in his country, and he was threatened with death and essentially kicked out, chased away for no reason. He did nothing wrong. But even to this day, when he talks about the Chinese government, he says, "My friends, the Chinese," right? And that just struck me. Whatever he's doing, whatever he's drinking, I want some of that wisdom, some of that compassion. So that led me down the path to Buddhism and to Buddhist training. Let's see, what else? There was also a book that was very instrumental to me by Brad Warner, who's a Soto Zen priest, hardcore Zen, which I thought was very cool because it took Buddhism and tied it to everyday life in a very simple, easy way. He's recently written another book. What's it called? Letters to a Dead Friend About Zen, which is also quite good. So yes, that's a short version of how I came to Buddhism. Are you practicing full time? So right now, I'm a lay Buddhist minister, which means I practice, but I also have a day job. I pay bills, etc. So I am practicing full time, but I don't wear my robes full time. I don't live at the temple full time. Advice for working professionals looking to take this spiritual journey. So I would say the best advice I could give you is to remember that your working life is not separate from your spiritual life. So that's something I struggled with, is I thought that I couldn't have a day job and practice Buddhism at the same time. So it was a real struggle for me. Again, going back to doing things half-heartedly. I was half-heartedly living my daily life because I thought, well, this Buddhism thing, this spirituality thing, that's the real thing I want to do. And it relieved a lot of suffering when I realized, no, my daily life is my spiritual life, and vice versa. So I talk about that experience in my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. But that's the main advice I would give you. Practice Buddhism wholeheartedly, and also remember that your daily life is not separate from your spiritual life. Admarin said, I'm also from the South. What state are you from? If you are willing to share, I'm from Georgia. Amika said, I'm from Texas. Oh, we have people from all over. That's cool. Amika also said, is Buddhism and Christianity compatible? Thoughts? I would say they are. They do differ in some key ways. So primarily around Jesus, for example. So Buddhists look at Jesus and we think of him as a bodhisattva, as an enlightened being. So similar to the Buddha, similar to Kannon, Jizo, Kannon being the bodhisattva of compassion, Jizo being the bodhisattva of hell beings, Amida, the Buddha of infinite light. We see him as an enlightened teacher. But but we don't worship him in the way that Christians do. So there are some differences there. However, I do think there are some more similarities than differences. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh actually wrote a great book, Living Buddha, Living Christ, where he talks about that. So let's see. There are many people who have successfully blended the two. I'm thinking specifically about Thomas Merton, who was a Franciscan friar. He was also an ordained Zen Buddhist priest. So he walked both paths. I think it can definitely be done. I think they are compatible. Like I said, there are some key differences, but probably more similarities than differences. So if your larger question is, can I do both? The answer is yes. Ed Marin said Brad Pitt. Thank you. I could see his face and I just couldn't think of his name, but thank you for that. Amika said, I love that, brother. Good for you. Thank you, Amika. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Ed Marin said, I have Hardcore Design, did not read it yet. I highly recommend it. I think it's a great book. I think Brad is a deeply realized teacher. So he has a blog, Hardcore Zen, and he also teaches in Los Angeles, I believe. He has a center there. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great. So I think you'll enjoy it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts once you've read it. Let's see, any other questions or concerns for this evening before we quit? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and practicing with me wholeheartedly today. I very much appreciate it. Admarin said, will do. Nice. Amitabha. Until next time.